Mary, thank you so much. You folks at the Patrick Dempsey Center have been absolutely incredible to work with, and we're so thrilled to have this opportunity to partner again with the Dempsey Center. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. How are you? It's Saturday afternoon. It's sunny. It's beautiful, and you're indoors. Oh, I'm so sorry. But thank you. This is awesome. This is really a fun gathering, and again, we're so pleased to have you here and to be working with the Patrick Dempsey Center for Cancer, Hope, and Healing. As Mary said, my name is David Swardlick. I'm a longtime board member for the Maine Center for Creativity and currently serving as interim executive director along with my day job or two, so it's kind of extra fun for me. But I also want to acknowledge Jamie Morin, back in the second row, who is the president of our board, and Jamie's company is Synchrony Point Consulting. Glad she's here flying the MCC flag today. It's been so much fun to work with the Patrick Dempsey Center for this event here as part of our 2015 Creative Toolbox Art and Science series. And it's so fitting, it seems to me, to be in a place where the science of medicine and the art of healing are so intertwined. It's in such a powerful way. So it really feels great to have this art and science event here today. Before we start our program, I want to acknowledge and thank our series sponsors. Many of our sponsors are here today and have guests and representatives here as well. So our premier series sponsors for the Art and Science series are Unum and WEX and CBRE, the Bolus Company. And along with them, our leadership sponsors are Maine Employers Mutual Insurance Company and Artel. Our benefactors are Rink Advertising, SMRT, Systems Engineering, and Acadia Trust. And for our series, our media partners are Maine Magazine and Maine Biz. And also I'd like to acknowledge our series hosts, Paula Lundgren of Brainstorm Biz, Steve Marsanskis and Jay Cross, financial advisors at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, and Soy Kobus Associates. So thank you to all of our sponsors, and thank you to the Patrick Dempsey Center. Please join me in thanking them. Just a word about the Maine Center for Creativity. We have spent some time ramping up our strategic focus under Jamie Morin's leadership, and we have a very exciting mission which I'll share with you. It's to forge alliances between arts and industry that make Maine more vital economically, more vibrant culturally, and more visible near and far as a place where innovation and creativity thrive. And to work toward that mission, we have a number of really interesting and exciting programs. Our major programs are the Art All Around Project, which many of you are quite familiar with if you drive up and down I-95, 295 or fly out of Portland Jetport. It's the project to create one of the world's largest public art paintings done in partnership with Sprague Energy on the South Portland waterfront. We're developing the Maine Network of Innovation and Creativity to accelerate collaboration and help brand Maine in new and exciting ways. That's an in-person and digital network of networks. Also, our very high visibility Maine Creative Industries Award Program, our ongoing support for Pachachaka Portland, can you say that? Pachachaka? And of course, this Creative Toolbox series. So this year, our Creative Toolbox series is themed the Art and Science series, and it's really an exploration of how science and art combine and complement each other to drive innovation. Innovation in business, innovation in our society, and innovation in culture. It's a three-part series. Many of you were at the first part with Dr. Edison Liu from the Jackson Laboratory. Really wonderful event that was all about exploring the broad sense of... I hear another one. Oh, sorry. That's okay. The first part of the Art and Science series explored the broad topic of creativity. The second one, here we are today, exploring the art and science of food. And on November 5th, keep in mind, we will have our Art and Science of Craft Brewing to take place November 5th at the wonderful Oxbow Tasting Room in Portland. And we have co-founder and global brewing genius Tim Adams here with us today. And if you're all very nice, you may get to sample a little Oxbow brew later in the day. And at that event, several Maine breweries and also Rob Todd, founder of Allagash Brewing Company, and Professor Lucy Benedict, a PhD in chemistry, will together help us explore the art and science of brewing and how innovation is driving that burgeoning industry. So at the Maine Center for Creativity, we have lots of projects and programs in the works. They're part of a shared vision to build what we call an engaged network of people and organizations that are all working at the intersection of art and science and industry, and they're committed to helping to make Maine grow, help Maine grow economically, culturally, and to stand out in the world. And speaking of stand out in the world, we have such a special treat today. Rob Evans is one of the brightest stars of Maine's extraordinary culinary movement, if we can call it that. Rob's a native New Englander. He learned his art and his craft from some of the most acclaimed chefs at high-profile restaurants, including the Inn at Little Washington and Napa's French Laundry. I think Rob got Maine very deeply into his hands, and I would say his heart, cooking on the Maine coast in Deer Isle, I believe.
Yes.
And finally made his way to Portland when he and his wife took over Hugo's. And since that time, Rob has continually brought countless people to Portland to enjoy our culinary scene and help us build national acclaim. Rob was one of Food and Wine's top 10 chefs in 2004, and in 2009 won a coveted James Baird Award. People just keep on coming to his restaurants. Rob's latest project, many of you have sampled over and over again, the unforgettable and wonderfully creative Duckfat in Portland. And that's brought even more acclaim to Maine and to Rob and his team. He's had appearances on the Martha Stewart Show, Rachel Ray. Duckfat is a 3-time Food Network Chopped champion restaurant, and it's now Duckfat is celebrating its decade of decadence. So we're very excited to have Rob here today. One little note about our program. Rob will wow you for probably the first hour, and then we'll take a quick break, give you a chance to ask a few questions, stretch your legs if you like, and then come back, continue the program, and then at the end there will be both an opportunity to ask lots of questions and, my favorite part of all, sample a few treats. So please welcome and thank Rob Evans. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on this beautiful Saturday day. I'd probably be on my motorcycle if I wasn't here today, so thanks for coming in. Thanks, Mary and the Dempsey Center for having me, and of course, David and the Maine Center for Creativity. When they first called me about this, wasn't quite sure. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone. I've done demos and stuff, but I just imagined me sitting up here on a chair and talking about Maine and food, which I could do for hours. So I requested a kitchen, so I'd kind of be in my comfort zone here, and then you get the benefit of sampling things as well, and we'll do some demos. I've got a huge list. If I touch on half of this stuff today, I'd be happy. What these guys do at the center, I think, really resonates with myself. Me and my wife Nancy, who's back there helping me prep food for you guys right now, bought Hugo's in 2000, and we're basically sleeping in the back of my truck, crashing on people's couches, and Hugo's came upon our doorstep. We didn't have any money, was working on a cook's wage, and we went through the process of trying to acquire it, borrowed a little bit from our parents who aren't wealthy, owner finance. Then we went from bank to bank and went through that process of trying to get a loan when we owned nothing. And we ended up hooking up with Norway Savings. And I think the key point there was we get to talk to the guy that says yes or no on the loan. There wasn't this chain of people that we had to work down. And we heard this elusive term called a character loan. Sounded great to me. I didn't put up any equity or anything for it. And in the end, I think that's what we got. Dan at Norway took a chance on us, and we acquired the money to buy Hugo's and opened up with about $1,000 working capital. Pretty nerve-wracking. And the dining room, no offense to Johnny, the previous owner, was not our style, but we had to live with it. So we spent the first 2 years living with that dining room and just decor that didn't kind of match our model. But what it did was help us focus on food and service through that time, and which I think is the heart and soul of any restaurant. I mean, you can put millions of dollars into a restaurant, but these days I look for more personality in restaurants more than the big, shiny, branded restaurant that you see a lot today. We ended up making enough money to renovate it and get it to close to where we wanted it to be. And Portland back in that time we were just a freak show coming into town. It was like, what are you guys doing? Tasting menus, the small portion thing, which now has taken off through Portland. It was, we took a lot of hits on that people felt like they weren't getting their value, that we're out to screw people because we're not giving them a heaping pile. Pork belly we had on the menu, and I couldn't call it pork belly. People were offended by it. I ended up calling it like pork breast and fresh bacon and all these other things. And now you get pork belly anywhere. I'm waiting for McDonald's to come out with a pork belly sandwich at this point. It's just an example, I think, though, where we are now, how great it is to own a business in Maine. Once we got through some of those growing pains, we got some of the accolades that David was talking about, and we started ramping it up. And then, of course, there's Duckfat, and the name Duckfat, which is totally bizarre. Me and Nancy argued over that for a long time. I just thought it was the most ridiculous name to put on a restaurant. And as soon as we painted it on the window, we knew it was a good idea. People were offended, elated, happy. It just was a name that stuck with a lot of people. So another example where it is today, it's insane how busy Duckfat is, how Maine has supported us through those times overall. So I was really excited when David came just to talk about that. Was enough for me to come in here and kind of share that experience with people. Especially you see Portland now, which in my opinion is one of the best food cities in the country. And there's the walking, you can walk to everywhere. You could probably have a 5-course meal, 1 course at 5 different restaurants and be really happy. Ethnic food, anything can be pulled off now. You know, you can go to Miyake and get pig intestines. I mean, it's just through the roof what you can serve now in Portland, as long as it's tasty. People hop on board. And as I was going through this and making some notes, I started thinking about why Portland is where it is right now, and I think there's a bunch of factors there. Number one, affordable rent. A lot of chefs, like myself back then, don't have the big dollars. It's a great place to come up, and you can get into a space for a reasonable amount of money. Second, although they might rival each other, is the food itself. Between the seafood off the coast of Maine that for years was shipped to Japan and everywhere else, the diversity of the seafood in Maine is just through the roof, hands down. That's an excuse enough. Then you got people like Mafka, some of the oldest organized organic farmers in the country, already established here. So chefs notice those things. So I think those two really helped. Coupled with its proximity to like New York and Boston too, as I really started to think about it, because I have friends who are I mean, restaurants like ours are popping up now all over America, not just in big cities, but in the suburbs, and they do well, considering like 15 years ago they would have failed miserably. But I think really how close we are to some major food cities, New York being one of the best in the world. We get a lot of New Yorkers coming up, a lot of people from Boston, and I just think it became infectious over time. And now you go out, like midwinter, I'll drive around Portland and restaurants are full. You know, and I know a lot of these guys, and I'll hear them him and hawing about how it's slow in the winter. I'm like, you guys have no idea what slow in the winter is like. Like our first 5 years, like we didn't go into the winter with some sort of strategy. We would have failed miserably, whether it was a bargain dinner or advertising or something to keep it going. Now people are going out to eat all the time. It's like become an acceptable recreation now. I live on, well, I have two places. I got a camp in Leamington that we spend half the time, and we got a place on Middle Street. So I'm across from Hugo's, which I sold to my staff in 2013. They opened up Eventide, then Honey Paw, and I got Duckfat down the street, and my two sous chefs, Carl Dubin and Bill Levy, opened up East Ender, and my apartment's on this perch just looking over all of this, which is great to see, some of the fruits of our labor and our staff moving on, but I get a real bird's eye view on who's going out to eat now, and it's mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s. They would never spend that money on food 10 years ago. Now it's okay. They're going out to eat and filling these restaurants. So that's my take on like why Portland is where it is right now, and its popularity. And I got crib notes here, so I'm going to keep poking in here just to keep myself up to date. That's kind of my take on business, restaurants in Maine, and then there's the science connection, which today is the other part of it. So I feel like today is two things. It's about business in Maine, innovation in Maine, and how Maine supports one another, and the other is how science and creativity mix. And when they called me, I thought I was a really good candidate for it. It's not anything I really do at Duckfat anymore, but I was right there when it started. You could call it molecular gastronomy, modernist cuisine, which I have some classic books up here that represent those styles. When it first came out, it was really, really exciting, I think, for a lot of cooks, because as American chefs, we don't have this lineage of history of our cuisine. I mean, we're known for McDonald's and pizza and some of the worst food in the world, really. And now we've launched, as we do in this country, once we latched on to creating a cuisine, I feel like we do have our own cuisine now in this country, and that modernist movement helped kind of just break that mold of, oh, it needs to be French technique, it needs to be this, it needs to be that. When I came to Maine in 2000, it was right from the French Laundry, which was immensely influential on how I looked at food. But the modernist food movement was just starting. Like they were talking, you'd hear chatter about El Bulli. I don't know if everyone knows about El Bulli, but there's this like place in Spain, and they've just devoted themselves to innovation and rethinking how we eat food. You'll go there, you get 32 courses, and it's a succession of just these crazy one bites that deliver textures, different flavors. The one I heard of first was he was doing pea soup at 2 different temperatures, one at 32 degrees and then one at 110 degrees, and layering it. And you would drink and you'd get to see how temperatures play off each other, and the salt and cold or the salt and hot. And the fact that he was giving directions on how to eat his food was back then was like, what? You know, how, what are you talking about? And then as it started to grow, so bumping into more cooks that went there to eat, went there to work. And I never went there, but I hear the same thing, that people have gotten the best thing they've ever eaten there and the worst thing they've ever eaten there. And For Ann, I was not worried about that at all. It was, matter of fact, they made no profit on the restaurant in the 20 years they were open. They made it on their books and other side stuff, but his goal was pure innovation and how to make what no one had ever seen before in food happen. I think they seat 70 people. He had 50 cooks for 70 people, almost a cook per person. And the way it was organized, it was like a science lab. It really was. It was the precision that you needed to run something like that was through the roof. And about, 2003, Grant Achatz, who I have his book up here, I worked with him at the laundry, and he had staged at, or apprenticed at El Bulli, came back, and it opened up Trio, which was his restaurant before Alinea, if anyone knows of any of these restaurants. And I called him up and I went out there and spent a week working with him. It was a big shift on how I looked at food, and it wasn't the chemicals or some of the other things I have up here. It was the mindset of like deconstructing what we normally think of as food and then reconstructing it to create your own voice or your own personality with it. Like one of his courses was a pizza, just said pizza, and it was a 1/4-inch square piece of paper. And he made the paper out of potato starch, dried tomato, fennel pollen, pepperoni oil, and you look at it and you're like, this is just nonsense. Of course, that's the whole meal's not like that. There's more substantial courses, and there's highs and lows and smalls, different sizes. And they instruct you to put it on your tongue and just let it sit there. And you know, you're kind of scoffing at it, and you put it on your tongue, and all of a sudden, like bam, you've just eaten a slice of pepperoni pizza. It just explodes into your mouth. And I think why Grant is still doing it today, because the whole modernist movement's kind of faded out, I think, into techniques that are viable today. Even at Duckfat, as simple as a sandwich shop is, that some of that stuff is made it in there. But I think Grant's secret was humor. He had a lot of humor in his food, and familiar. Like he took apart a Worcestershire sauce, what makes Worcestershire sauce, anchovies and tamarind, and worked that into a steak dish as an example. So as far out as the delivery might be, you can connect with it. Like, oh, steak, Worcestershire, pepperoni pizza. Right now he's got a, if it's your birthday, you go in there and you get a green apple balloon filled with helium that floats, and it comes to your table and you suck the helium, and voice gets funny, and then you eat the balloon. As an example of his humor. And he's still going strong today because of that, I think. It's just, he doesn't take himself too seriously, but his food is just amazing. Again, 32 courses. So how that influenced me was, like for instance, when Grant was there at Trio, El Bulli's book came out, the one on the right, and he didn't open it yet. I'm like, you haven't looked in there yet? And he's like, no, I don't want it to influence me at the moment. And that resonated as well. Like even after my stage there, I came back and tried not to mimic him, but use that train of thought to just rethink how you look at food and create your own vision or your own voice. And I got to thank Grant for that. So now we're in this place in the country. It's just amazing. There's this like craft movement, we call it. And I often joke, like, try find the word craft over in Europe. It's just what they've been doing for like hundreds of years. You know, over here it's like we're just trying to do better than the mediocre food that we were so used to eating for years and years and years. And Tim today from Oxbow, craft beer, good example. Just looking at beer with a whole fresh set of eyes. Even Duckfat French fries, that's a craft version of French fries, and you got craft pizza and craft coffee, and there's this like craft movement right now, which I think represents how we all want to eat. My generation coming up, we don't want to put on a suit, we don't want to sit down, we don't want to pay a fortune for dinner, but we'll pay money for good food. And people go out now for a casual dinner and they'll spend $150 on just casual eats done well, where before that was a fine dining experience to spend that money. So it's really exciting to see us kind of coming into our own in this country as far as our own cuisine goes. I love hearing that McDonald's is trying to be healthy with their menu, because to me that means they're on the downslide and they're going to hopefully be gone here soon. But I think that's a good example of how educated we are too, compared to, let's say, 20 years ago. And that education, I think a lot of it is TV, starting with the Food Channel. I remember the Food Channel started as a young cook, Emeril Lagasse. That was great, having a real chef on there and not just a face doing a cooking demo, and then the Japanese Iron Chef, and then from there, they went to where they are today. Regular television, network television, Bravo. There's all these cooking shows. There's probably what, 24 cooking type shows now on television, not even affiliated with the Food Network. So we've taken the bait and they're running with it now, which is good to see. I got my opinions on the Food Network. I think they could be a little bit more. They kind of stay in a safe place, but they're educating people. They're exposing people to foods, and in return, people are coming out to eat. And it's almost a badge of honor now. You eat sashimi or pig intestines or a raw oyster or whatever. It's just like a macho thing now. And I think that has also fed into it, television. It's almost on a pop level now, food. It's crazy. It's how fast it's gone. It's the new rock star. I said, so many young kids coming in, they're going to be a rock star. They're going to come in and be a cook and get tattoos all over them and sit at the bar and drink and get all that attention. And it's legit. People are getting the attention now and becoming the rock stars they wanted to be. I had one cook, I had to fire him. He was upset he wasn't getting all the attention that he was getting before. And he used to be a drummer and stuff, and just and you can be that now though too. Like before the internet, before the TV and everything else, you had to go to Europe, go to the big cities in America, and just get in with someone and apprentice. Culinary school does nothing for you in that area. It just kind of starts you, which is a whole other topic, the amount of money they pay for culinary school these days. Now, it's great chefs all over the country, so you can hop in anywhere. Here in Lewiston, we ate around here last week, and there's great food here in Lewiston. A young cook now can, in his hometown or pretty close, find a place and work under someone and learn quite a bit. There's also the internet. I mean, pick a technique, Google it, YouTube, boom, you're watching something that you would have had to go to Japan for or had to go to Europe for. Come in, experiment, and get close. So in 5 years' time, if you're really motivated, you could go from not cooking to chef of your own restaurant and get all those accolades. I've seen it, if you're smart enough and the right influences and whatnot. Unheard of 20 years ago. No one moved that far. You had to be in your 40s before you even thought you could even handle all that pressure. So for today, I've summed it up in 4 categories, maybe for myself more than you. It's just such a vast topic, food, that I've come up with 4 categories that help you understand, like, maybe my approach to food and how these things contribute to an overall menu. In Hugo's, it would be like 12 to 18 course menus, and how to make it not boring. Highs and lows, brightness, acidity, all those things come into play. Presentation is the other thing. And then it begs the question, where does art or science fade out in art and creativity comes in? Which is a good question as I start thinking about this topic. I heard something on NPR. They were asking, this is a local artist, what's the difference between a craft and an art, and that the craft is the process and the art is the finished thing. That was his opinion on it. And I often joke that food wasn't an art because it didn't have the same, the energy behind it. I guess you could call it art, but I would say a craft on one level, an art maybe at the time of eating, the time it comes to the plate, comes to the table. So the craft part of it is what's really engaging as a chef. And then the medium of food is just, I can't think of another medium where visually it's appealing. Sound, and I equate sound to texture. Something's crunchy. Smell, you can taste so many more things with your nose than you can your mouth. And then taste and be totally engrossed in it and then consume it. It's really, I don't know of another medium that has all those qualities. And then we're drawing from nature as well. So there's all this wonderful bounty around us. And then as a chef, to take all that in and then present it to you with all those things involved is what hooks most of us as chefs. And it's never ending. It's just the amount of combinations is just through the roof. It'll never get old. It's always new. And that's kind of what I think drives me and a lot of other chefs. So these 4 categories, I kind of set them up with a little bit of history. I'll do a little bit of demo on some of it. And we'll have some tastings at the end, just some snacks as we're going through this. Sorry, I messed with this thing here. And the first topic was salt. Seems like a pretty simple one. But without salt, nothing would taste good, literally. A little bit of salt goes a long way in pastries. I eat all my ice cream with Maldon salt on top all the time. It just gives this great pop. But as I was thinking about salt as a category, I was like, wow, it's kind of boring. Where does creativity come into play with salt? How does salt lean over to creativity in art, to stick with the topic today? And there was a few things that I had with. You must be staring at this now for the past half hour. This is fish sauce from my root cellar. We have 80 acres in Leamington, and I have a root cellar up there, so I have all sorts of experiments and stuff, and this is one of them. This is 2 years old, been in my root cellar. And fish sauce, one of the oldest recorded recipes known. Romans were doing it. They called it garum, and of course, what we get from Thailand that you see on the shelf, you can purchase. And this here is the Maine version of Thai or Roman fish sauce. It's Maine mackerel, cut up, innards and everything. The innards are important to add to the breakdown, the transformation in there. And then it's 20% salt, which is really high. Anything over 3% you would just think was way too salty. So this is 20%. And you press it for a day till the liquids come out, and then you put it in the jar, you leave the top open, and you throw it anywhere for years. And it just sits. And it's crazy because up here will get moldy and get funky, and you take it off, and where the salt is, there's nothing. There's nothing that can survive in this solution. And it was just an experiment at first. And the first one I did for a year, and it was so delicious that I got these constantly going now. And you can see on the bottom, that's the prime stuff right there. So you would just strain this out. It's really strong, the 20%, so I'll double it in water, and I'll get a 10% salt ratio, but you'll use that to season foods. If anyone cooks at home, loves those Thai flavors or whatever fish sauces, indispensable. Next to it, I have these. This is a copa, which is a pork shoulder, and this is lomo, which is a pork loin. So this sits in a salt and spice solution for about 2 weeks. And then on the outside here is a casing, sausage casing. And then this is cut in half. It usually hangs whole. And they only hang it for 2 months. And you're encouraging moisture loss, moisture coming out of it. The more moisture comes out of it, the more it gets preserved. Water is where most of your bacteria will start to come in. So you've got salt in the exit of moisture, making it stable. And there's a point where it's hanging at 50 degrees, and that's like a perfect medium where water comes out. It's not too warm, not too cold. And essentially, that's a snapshot of how prosciuttos are done or anything like that. I love it because of the preservation. Most of the stress I feel in our business is perishability. You spend all this money on food, it comes through the door, and you have to like get on it and move it out the door, or you'll lose money or quality or whatever. So anytime I can stop something in time like that, it just feels really rewarding. And a couple other salt experiments that I wanted to show you. Here is a miso cured egg yolk. This has been sitting in miso, which is a soybean paste with salt. It's fermented. And these just sit in there with a little bit of sake and sugar for only a week. And it firms them right up, and you can grate them on stuff, and you get this kind of umami, this full flavor from the salt and then the aging of the egg yolk. And you can do this in ground anchovies, anything that has salt in it. You could probably do it right with fish sauce. Stick it in there. And then you get this really hard egg yolk that you can grate on things. So just another example of, again, trying to connect salt and creativity. There's a couple of good examples of where salt comes in outside of just simply seasoning your food, which I think is one of the number one things missing from restaurants if you don't like the food. Or I got cooks coming in, and teaching them salt is the number one thing, and how to season properly. Maldon salt right here, one of my favorites. There's also seasoning all your food, and then there's also contrast. It's like me personally at home, I love plain white rice with something really spicy and salty, and you get this play of bland against salt. Or even in a salad, so you don't use kosher salt, and you just dress it with a vinaigrette, and you just sprinkle Maldon on it. You get a bland flavor, and all of a sudden you get a crunch. The next bite, maybe a little more salt. The next bite, a little less salt. So the more I thought about it, there's a ton of creativity when it comes to applying salt to food. There's brining. If anyone cooks at home, I won't cook almost anything without brining it these days. And the brining does the opposite. Like this, I shouldn't say it does the opposite, but the salt draws the moisture out. And when you brine food, you penetrate the meat with salt, and it retains water as much as 15% more. So if you're roasting a turkey or a piece of meat, by brining, you've added 15% more plus moisture to your food. And you've given yourself a window too for overcooking. You could go a little bit over on temp, and you'd be much more forgiving. Fish, we brine all our fish, a 10% solution, just for an hour, pull it out, dry it, and you'll see the difference. Like with cod, if you just sear it straight up, it's delicious, a lot of water comes out of it, but you brine it for just an hour, dry it and sear it, and you'll get this really creamy, tight texture in it. So another example of how you can use creativity when it comes to salt. I almost did water instead of salt because the two go back and forth. Like water is the enemy of flavor. In a sense, a lot of what you do in the kitchen is getting rid of water, whether it's reducing or the type of water you use, but I thought salt was a bit more interesting of a topic. And from salt, my next category was knife. Knife being, I guess, technology. If you think back to the first caveman chucking a whole wildebeest, fur and all, onto a big fire, and then they finally figured out how to make an edge out of a stone and skinned it and cleaned it properly and cooked it. That must have been a revelation back then. So the knife and its importance with food, I thought, was a good topic to talk about. Then I started thinking about it. Almost all the appliances are a advanced version of the knife, from a food processor to a meat grinder to a blender. They're all an extension of the knife. And then the knife really becomes an extension of your tooth, in a sense. It makes things palatable. For instance, how does carpaccio work? Carpaccio's raw tenderloin. When you're eating raw tenderloin, how does that work? Well, you've taken a slicer usually, and you go across the grain on it, so you've created these really short strands, and now you're eating raw meat with almost no effort. An example of how the knife is an extension of your tooth. Like the difference between mincing an onion and putting an onion in a food processor. Put an onion in a food processor, you come out with chopped onions sitting in onion water. You mince an onion with a sharp knife and you get this dry, chopped product that still has all its moisture in it and all its water content. So how to differentiate when it's important to use a food processor or a knife is a good thing as a cook. I brought some examples too of some of the common things today. Of course, there's the microplane, which is now in almost everyone's kitchen. This is amazing what you can do today with a microplane as far as breaking down hard things and grating them over food. And then the mandolin, these two things right here are probably the most used things in any kitchen around the world. French have a version of it. This is a Japanese version. And you can take the hardest vegetables, run them through that, and you get the same thing as if you were doing carpaccio or tartare. Tartare is the same thing. You take tartare and you mince it up really fine, plus the dressing helps break it, and the knife has taken over as your an extension of your teeth. Fennel, which a lot of people look at it and don't know what the hell to do with it. Maybe roast it or whatever, but even myself, who've been using a knife for years, it would be hard for me to do that consistently with a knife. Although there are people out there that can, especially Japanese are just ahead of everyone else when it comes to knife work. They probably do this right in their hand. It's also interesting to see, if you look at every infomercial out there about food, it's a knife chopping gadget. It's been going on for like 20-something years now. You know, you got the thing that'll chop and it'll do all this other stuff. And if I had it in me, I'd do my own infomercial, and it would be showing people how to use a knife and sharpen a knife. And that's what it's hard for a home cook. This is as a chef, you have it in your hand all day long. So how are you, you're more comfortable with it. You're not worried about cutting your fingers. You have speed. And first thing most people who maybe cook once or twice a week. It's like, oh my God, I gotta cut up 4 carrots and an onion. Half hour later, like exhausting. It's no wonder we go out to eat. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't learn this at home. It's like instead of all these gadgets, if someone just came out and just said, hey, this is a knife. This is how you sharpen a knife. This is how you could not cut your fingers with a knife. Really, a DVD with a knife, I think, would go a long way with people. Although you do have to cut off all your fingertips once in order to get really, really good with it. But they sell these nice gloves now that you can use to cut, so you could cut that learning curve in half, or maybe save some of your tips by using one of these knives. I mean, a big tip people don't know, it's like, oh, I'm gonna cut this, how am I gonna do it? It's rolling, you know? Simply by putting a flat on it. I don't have a peeler here, otherwise I'd peel this. All of a sudden, I've got this rock stable thing on here. Fingers out of the way, and it's so easy now. I've got a nice stable spot and less the chance of cutting my fingers. Keeping them curled in is the hard part, but the whole reason for even talking about it is just how important the knife is. And I just love for someone to come up with a knife program that people at home could use. And then there's the sharpening of the knife, which again seems like, oh, only chefs can sharpen knives. You know, you see everything we do with a knife. I'm, you know, casually talking and swinging this blade on a steel, and seems like there's some mystery that the home cook just can't seem to grasp. Little bit of instruction, and they'd totally be maintaining their own knife. Just as a quick demo here, this is a sandstone. This is a carbon steel knife, Japanese knife, which pretty much the only disadvantage of this is it gets ugly like that. A lot of the stainless steel knives, they look great, they clean up easy, but they're hard to put an edge on, or harder, and they don't maintain it as long, where your carbon steel will hold an edge for a long time, and it's easy to put one back on it. And there's like the 15% angle that you're shooting for. But you always want to sharpen your own knife, because my natural might be a 17%, yours might be a 13, so you just, as long as it's the same. And there's, you know, there's thoughts of, you know, oh, you gotta do it long, keep nice swoops. Not so much, it's the angle. That's important. This has got 2 grits on it, fine, coarse, and you can just hold it, keep that angle, switch sides. You want to try to do both sides evenly. And if I was to do this longer, I'd get this mud, and that's when you know you're really honing the edge on it. Get this like buildup of silt on here, and that's what really starts to break down the blade. Finish it on the fine. That's my 1-second knife sharpening demo. Now my sister, I bought a knife, and I know she's not going to sharpen it ever, so I got her diamond steel with it. And with the amount of time your average home cook cooks, if you just did this, same principle with the angle, before you cooked every time, you get a full year, if not longer. I check her knife every time I go over the house, and it still has an edge on it. And just that simple, just maintaining it as you go, you can keep a sharp knife in your kitchen, you know, pretty effortlessly. But if you do want to sharpen it, I highly recommend just buying a stone, and it becomes very relaxing too over time. Next category, let's see, we've got about an hour here. I also want to open it up for questions too. We've got someone with a mic that will run around, and I welcome any questions. Love to hear questions, makes me feel comfortable up here. I'm going to go into temperature. So as I'm going through the next hour, you guys want to ask questions, feel free. If anyone's needs.
Come on.
The fish stock, the top of the lid, is that just the cheesecloth?
Yes. Needs to breathe.
Another question?
It smells like a can of sardines or anchovies. As god awful and evil as this looks, it smells really good if you like sardines or anchovies, whatnot.
And water?
Yes, just water. In the restaurant, we'll just keep it in the water. It's a good question, but at home you can just leave it out dry, and then when you're getting ready to do it, soak it for 5 minutes.
What about the stone oil that they used to use?
That's more of a German style. Kind of the Germans and Japanese lead the industry in knife making, and a lot of German knives are maintained with an oil stone. Same type principle, but for carbon steel like that, you can do stainless steel on sand as well. I prefer the sandstone overall.
Is that sandstone the same as what I'm thinking is the whetstone? Are they the same thing?
Yep, same thing. Whetstone, sandstone, same thing.
Another question?
So I hear this term molecular gastronomy all the time, and I don't really know what it means. Is it? What does it really mean as far as the food you make and the cooking process and what it does to the bonds that hold food together and stuff like that? And what does it mean practically when you actually take your knife and your salt and your heat and apply that?
It's a good question. And that term has been batted around. Most chefs don't like that term, molecular gastronomy. It's kind of morphed into modernist cuisine. This book right here is one of 5 that's out, and it's just crazy the amount of information that's in this thing. It's a $500 set of books. So I think modernist is kind of what that settled down into. And molecular came into play because all of a sudden we were inundated with all these people thought were chemicals. But baking soda can be a chemical, baking powder is a chemical, and really a lot of these ingredients, also known as like hydrocolloids, are natural from seaweed or soy or something like that. So I think all those things coming into play, people attached this molecular gastronomy name on it. But these things, I got some examples up here. I've got Versa Whip, which last night I just wanted to see if I could do it, and it worked. I whipped water with that stuff. I was able to whip water. Xanthan gum helps hold air into products. Now these have been used in big industry for forever. So maltodextrin right here, you can mix this with any fat and make a powder out of it. So as a tool, they just cracked it wide open. Endless possibilities with it. One product that I really liked was called Activa, and also known as meat glue. And they would use it in turkey loaf. Anytime you buy any meat product with a loaf on it, it's got Activa in it. And it's no flavor, and with pressure in about 6 hours, you could adhere chicken to a duck breast, wrap it up, cook it. It will hold up through the whole cooking process and cut, and you'd have chicken and duck. For waste management, it was huge. For instance, we used to do a lot of cod tongues and cod head and whatnot, but there would be this muscle right here in the throat, which I would just called it cod throat. And it's this little skinny thing, but build up 8 of them, little Activa, tie it into a tube, let it sit for 6 hours, and you can sear it off like a scallop. So you can take a lot of stuff that might go into chowder and be a bit more creative with it. So all those things combined seems molecular and very science-like. But big industry has been using them forever. And some examples, Doritos, which I've last year or two, I've developed a habit. I think I need to go to rehab or something for Doritos, because I've never ate them before. But you read the back of them, maltodextrin, there's citric acid, something that hasn't been used, MSG, yeast extract. This is like scientifically designed to make you can't stop eating them. You light one, you just can't stop. And you had a bunch of psychiatrists and scientists going, what is it that makes us want to just keep eating? And a lot of it is the MSG factor, or umami, just that flavor that kind of just turns off the thing in your head that says you've had enough, and you just keep going. And as far as umami goes in here, it's crazy. Anything you dry, everyone knows what umami is. It's like this other taste that's kind of accepted now. And it's like Parmesan, soy, beer, things that have been fermented, aged, dried, anything like that brings out that like umami flavor. And in here they've got like 9 of them. It's like tomato powder, whey, actual MSG on top of it, like, oh, that stuff wasn't enough. Dried cheddar, buttermilk, through the roof, the amount of science that went into this chip. And they've been doing this for years. Big industry. They've been, a lot of it is for the name of preservation, which means it will travel well, it'll sit on a shelf, it won't go bad. And as far as, I get a very ugly thing of Ben & Jerry's because it's another example. As far as entering the restaurants, we're using this now for quality and flavor and creativity, not just preservation, profit, and travel qualities. Ben & Jerry's, which I usually eat, Haagen-Dazs. If you look at Haagen-Dazs, there's like 5 ingredients in Haagen-Dazs, real ice cream. How they do it, I don't know, because it's super stable. Because that's the problem with ice cream and travel, is if it melts and then comes up a little bit, you'll get crystallization, and it'll start to, like Breyers is classic. Breyers, how crystallized Breyers can get. The amount of stuff in this is through the roof as well. Carrageenan, which is from seaweed, and in the industry, we use Carrageenan now. You can serve a hot custard that's gelled. You can serve, you can make a sauce out of it and nap like fish or meat. It'll create this crust over it when you cut into it, and the sauce is basically enveloping the product. So that kind of, I think, might give you an idea of what molecular gastronomy, how it got that term. Is because of all these things was just so weird to be on the everyday food.
I think we have one question.
My son Aiden wanted me to ask you this. He's 9. What was it like competing on Top Chef, and were you scared?
Oh, I think you mean Chopped. 'Cause I didn't do Chopped. Yes. I was scared up until first round, and after that, it was just so much fun that I embraced it. Not that it wasn't nerve-wracking, but yeah, there was fear there, because you don't want to be the first guy chopped. So you get through the first one, it's like, all right, I'm good to go. And I did 3 of those shows, and my sous chef at Duckfat did one as well. So 4 times our company has been associated with that, and been good for business as well. Love reruns. Wave of people with reruns. Oh, was it? Yeah. I know. Molecular gastronomy, that kind of brings me into the temperature discussion a little bit, and what all of that molecular stuff turned into today, and how it applies. Like xanthan gum, I'll use that at Duckfat. Put a pinch of that in any vinaigrette and it won't separate. Put a pinch of that in some homemade ice cream, it won't crystallize. Put a pinch of it when you're whipping something, which I'll show you in a little bit. It'll help maintain the air in it. So there's a lot of value to some of that stuff. I think when it first came on, you could get that type of cuisine so bad. It was awful. You wouldn't want to sit through it. And now it's kind of leveled out, I think, to these techniques and equipment that apply. You've probably seen this thing going behind me. It's called an immersion circulator. That is as common now in a kitchen, more common than a microwave oven in a good kitchen nowadays. Health department's all baffled by it. They hate it. They're confused by it. But really, it's the vacuum sealing that they don't like, because there is potential to trap harmful bacteria in here, and it can give you this false sense of security. Oh, it's vacuum sealed, everything's good. Well, if you vacuum seal botulism in there, it doesn't do you any good. And so outside of the putting it in a bag, this is basically just a precise way of temperature control. You can dial in a temperature to the ½ degree. For instance, on eggs, I've got a couple different temperatures here. Not temperatures, same temperature, 145. That's where whites just start to set and the yolks still kind of runny. But it's more than just temperature, it's time. So I've got same temperature, one in for 45 minutes, another in for an hour and a half, and then this one's been going since I've been here, which is over 2 hours. So you start with the 45, and you can see there's a little bit of gel going on. The whites are set. Go double that time. Whites are the same. The yolks even more set. And this one that's been in there for a couple hours, it's a little bit more chewy. This probably could go a little bit longer and it would set up, but the white more or less stays the same. Huge that you can control the cooking of an egg now down to 45 degrees exactly. You know, no one was doing that 20 years ago, even though you could pretty much take this, which is what we all did till these things really made it to the market, was use a digital thermometer, set your time and watch it, and then just keep it moving. Because not only does it set the temperature, but it circulates. So it keeps an even temperature through the whole thing. And that's not going to go anywhere. That piece of equipment is here to stay. And I got friends who are opening up restaurants and they're worried about the health department and what are they going to say? Am I going to get cited? Am I going to get a fine or whatever? And it's that vacuum sealing that is what they don't like. For instance, this egg, there's nothing they could say about that. Nothing. It's just a controlled poaching of an egg. One of the advantages of doing vacuum sealing is I could vacuum seal a pork tenderloin in, say, truffle oil or pig fat. So you just use a little bit of addition of a liquid inside the bag, seal it, temperature control it, and you can create all these things. Outside of that, though, I could simply fill that with pork fat, set the temperature, throw a pork chop in there, and essentially do the same thing that I would be doing in a vacuum seal bag. The health department couldn't say anything. It's just a controlled form of cooking. What else do I got on the category of temperature for you? Any questions going through this? That's good. I've got.
I think we have one here.
Is that the same as, and I'll get the name wrong, but sous vide?
Yes. Yep. This is considered sous vide, under pressure, in a vacuum. This is not. This in there is what they call sous vide. Yep. The topic of temperature.
I have one more question while you're
Yes.
working on that.
Since you brought it up about temperature and food in the health department, I
One of the things that throws off the working moms that I'm come in contact with on a regular basis is when to throw out food. And do you think we've become a little over cautious around, oh, let's make sure we cook that egg till within it's hard as a rock,
Yeah.
because of salmonella. Or I've heard lately that pork, you don't have to be quite as paranoid about pork anymore.
Right, trichinosis. and
Yeah,
whatnot,
how do
yeah.
can you give us those cooks at home some advice about how to navigate those worlds of when do we have to worry about bacteria? And when-
Sure. That's a really good question. And actually, fermentation was one topic I thought I'd touch on, but I'm sure Tim could do a much better job with his beer demo in November on that. But like our food, it's like been a attack on all bacteria, good and bad. Make it dead. McDonald's, classic example. You've seen on YouTube these people that put a hamburger under a glass dome on their shelf for 5 years and nothing changes. Like rodents and bugs won't eat it. What does that say about the food? And then like even yogurt, you take yogurt forever, it had no cultures in it. It was basically a pudding, a milk pudding. Sauerkraut, cooked. You see it in the jar cooked. They should just cook cabbage. Why even bother through the whole thing of fermentation? And now it's becoming much more part of how we eat with kimchi. Duckfat, we're certified to do fermented vegetables now, the first in Maine, and health department has a problem with it because they just want everything dead. They want all the food dead. They don't want us to have any risks, nothing at all. That's why when we travel, we get sick so quick, and our systems is just so like sanitary compared to other cultures. The owner of Morse's Sauerkraut says he hasn't been sick in 30 years. He eats sauerkraut every day. I don't know how true that is. It's a good marketing ploy. I'm talking about it today. But now people are eating more fermented foods. More people are making fermented foods. And just that idea of fermented, a lot of people cringe at fermented. Like, oh, it's sour, it's bad, And I think that's changing. As far as like, you were talking about eggs in your cooler and whatnot. Again, I get calls from my sister all the time. She's like, oh, is this still good? I'm like, how's it smell? It just smells good. And I go, it's probably good. And you can use that pretty much, outside of things like botulism, which is popular in canning food, or listeria, which means you've just been totally careless with your food. Nose would be the first thing you could trust. That's what our senses are for. I think a lot of it is to be able to pick out what's going to hurt us and what isn't. So I'm just going to slide this thing, because if I don't do this here, I'll be so bummed that I got liquid nitrogen and we never touched on it. So I got this from Ilma at Piccolo, great restaurant in Portland. If anyone's been there, I think they're the best spot in town. Ilma, she's trained at Elbely, French Laundry, per se, and one of the best pastry chefs in town. And that's where this really is become a consistent part of what people do, pastry. And I like to refer to it as reverse frying. And when you first get it, that's what you do. Say, oh, what can I chuck in my liquid nitrogen and smash it on the table? And it's, if you got this in your eyes or on your, if you cupped it in your hand, you'd get really bad freezer burn. But if it's splashed on the back of your hand and rolled off, it wouldn't be so bad. But there is potential to get hurt by it. And I brought it in as an example of extremes of temperature involved in cooking. This is 320 degrees below zero. That's pretty cold. And you can cook as much as up to 1,000 degrees if you look at a pizza oven. Maybe even further if you want to talk about a torch bruleeing something, the temperature goes higher. So there's this really wide range of temperatures that cooks use. And to bring it back to art and science and creativity, the amount of options now that something like this will give you, or something like that right there. We just talked about how I can control temperature by the 0.5%. Now I can freeze stuff at 320 degrees below zero. My next topic is air, but this totally is another example of air. These aren't going anywhere either in the industry. They call this an ISI, it's a nitrogen thing, and people have been putting cream in it and doing whipped cream out of it forever. When I first learned how to aerate stuff in here, it was like, wow, the amount of stuff that you could do with this. You can pretty much aerate anything inside this with gelatin. Take rhubarb juice, cucumber water, tomato water, 2 cups, 3 sheets of gelatin, put it in here, 2 charges, shake it up, let it chill, and you can create like a mousse out of anything. Comes in really handy on all sorts of levels. And I'm going to try to do this and not spray myself and everyone in the front row. This is take my cues from Gallagher. Tying the knot, that's the tricky part. This is cider. Cider and gelatin. I've got an apple dessert for you later. I've done cakes out of that too. You put cake batter in there, and then you squirt it into a cake pan, or a paper cup rather, and then you microwave it. And you get a perfect like angel food sponge cake out of it. And if you think about what is it doing, why does that work? Well, when you put a cake in the oven, you're using leaveners, you're using eggs, you're adding air to it. And then you put it in the oven. So you're mimicking that, and you can end up doing it in the microwave. Did these so fast earlier. Pressure. Everyone's staring at me while I tie a balloon. I'd be sweating and running. So, filled with cider mousse. And we'll top it a little bit more. And as far as its application in the restaurant, outside some of these things I'm doing right here, ice cream. You need to use a non-reactive bowl like this. If I put it in metal, it would just, might even crack it. Something else, it might break it. Styrofoam is a great medium. I don't have a styrofoam bowl, and now they make bowls that you can do it, and you put your ice cream base in there, you pour liquid nitrogen over it, whisk it, instant ice cream.
What kind of whisk would you use?
Could use a metal whisk, yeah, 'cause you have the plastic handle on it and stuff like that. Air conditioning. And then I don't have the best spider for this, but this is melted ice cream. You can do pellets. I could do forms, crazy forms, whatnot. And again, it just opens up the amount of possibilities that you can do. When I was at Hugo's, I did a lot of the desserts. And a lot of chefs don't like dealing with desserts. To me, it was so fun because dessert, you don't have the expectations that you do with the beginning of the meal. It needs to deliver flavor, volume, all those things. By the time it comes to dessert, you're like, yeah, sure, maybe not. So I would run with that and just felt like it was a really creative medium. And a lot of this stuff applies really easy to desserts. A lot of this stuff is heat sensitive. So as you do that with savory food or hot food, it doesn't work so well. But if you're doing cold desserts, just through the roof, the possibilities that these hydrocolloids and whatnot to play. So here's an example. I don't know if I'm going to waste time getting this balloon off here, but I think you get the idea. Frozen cup of cider mousse. It's almost like a meringue. You can see that. And a lot of times we'll do stuff just like this, and smash it, and then this becomes, a component on a dish. So, an example of just what liquid nitrogen can add as another tool. And that's what a lot of these things are, molecular gastronomy, that name. To me, it's just given us as cooks a whole range of tools that were never there before.
Where do you get liquid nitrogen?
Most of your places that do CO2 and stuff for bars, you can get it. This is food grade. It's important. There's different kinds. So this is a food grade liquid nitrogen. And you don't need a license or anything. You take that cauldron, go down there and fill it up, and they'll charge you. And I got friends that have full-on 200-gallon tanks that get filled up every week, and they just pour off of that. And
So how does that change the sort of the preparation routine in a restaurant where it seems like that's time consuming?
Well, I made it look time consuming. With practice, it can make sense. A lot of tableside stuff is done with that because it's just really fun to watch a tableside. But time's a good question. I mean, a good observation, because to do those shards like that, it's got to go on the plate and be out really fast or it's going to melt. So you do have to be organized and have dishes that make sense for it. Now, as far as ice cream goes, you could use this in lieu of an ice cream machine, which is expensive. Pour it in, whisk it, then put it in a container and freeze it, and it's like any other ice cream machine would work. This is a smoked duck breast I'm just going to put in there while I talk about some other things. And we'll give you an example of some of the other uses for it outside of like dessert and stuff like that.
Back on that shell, how long would that last? Like, you make a bunch at the beginning of the service and last all night? Or
You could put them in the freezer. Pop them open, put them in the freezer, and they'll stay. It's so fast of a freeze that that's the difference. That's the opportunity it offers, is that really fast freezing.
Other questions while
Yes.
Rob is working?
I've been learning a lot about the sustainable fish programming.
Mm-hmm.
Are you using underutilized and that type of fish when you cook?
Well, at Duckfat, hence the name, not a lot of fish there. But at Hugo's, yes, most definitely. I tried to stick totally within Maine for all of my fish. Never would order snapper, as much as I love all those things. I really tried to be Maine-centric at Hugo's when I was there, which meant using a lot of off-the-wall fish sometimes, especially after 9/11. We had Hugo's for about a year, then 9/11 came, and it changed so much stuff. All of a sudden, we're using beef cheeks and other fish that normally we wouldn't even use before because no one was going out to eat, so it was a cost savings. But then as a chef, all those weird fish, those odd cuts, is where the challenge is. You look at offal, you know, innards, it just sounds horrific to a lot of people. Some people really enjoy them. I'm good with some of it. It's not like I want to sit down for 3 hours and eat innards myself. But as a chef, the challenge of that is where the fun is. You know, to be able to take something that most people throw in the trash and then present it, have people pay good money for it, and have them enjoy it is really fulfilling in the end. So I've got a half hour left, and I'm going to get into my air discussion. And I thought air was a good one. Like at Hugo's, I used to try to, how could I incorporate air into food? This right here, you can do hot mousses in it. It doesn't stand up like that. That was one way. How to not just put air into food, but how to maintain it and keep it fluffy. So this mixer will be loud for about a minute, and I'll set up another thing after it. But we're still using cider. So we have 400 grams of cider, 8 grams of Versa Whip, which is like a modified soy product. That's this bag right here. Yeah, if you can fit them around the, or up at the top there. It's my wife, Nancy, getting me out of the weeds here. And what you can, the Versa Whip, last night, again, I whipped water, which my buddy Jim there and Nancy are like, why are you whipping water? But it was a good exercise to see the potential of something like that in a kitchen. So I will just let this go here for about a minute, and you should see whipped cider in the end. Whipping. So 2 examples of trying to incorporate air into something. This one right here is an example of modernist food. I was able to make a mousse out of out of cider with the use of Versa Whip, which makes this possible, and xanthan gum to stabilize it. So now I've got this really modernist view of whipped cider. that is one way to do it. But as an example of, like I was saying earlier with Grant and Alinea, how it's not about the chemicals, it's about how you think about it. This is using using food products that have been around forever. This is sheet gelatin. You're probably used to powdered gelatin, and you soak it in cold water, and it softens it up. Again, I don't know the history of gelatin, but it's been around for a really long time. Did everyone get to see that moose? I keep forgetting there's a camera above me here. So, dissolved in warm. And this is what, I like to think I came up with this, but every time I think I came up with something, I found out it's been done before, which is equally rewarding. But this is more of a presentation reason to do a freestanding mousse. Why? Who cares? Why do you even care about a freestanding mousse? You can just put it into a jar and a container. But if you're trying to wow guests or just love the challenge of those types of problems, you can embrace it. I find like with this modernist movement, talked earlier about like someone in 5 years could become a chef these days. There's also a disconnect though by doing that. Like a lot of restaurants abuse that machine right there, and everything goes in it. Plastic bags, everything's sealed up, and you just set temperatures and you drop it in, you walk away, and you've totally lost that feel through cooking. I'm by no means a scientist, or I guess there's so many chefs that are so much more versed on this type of cuisine that I am. But I also feel like I did a pretty good job weeding through all of that and coming up with stuff that's genuine. Because the way I cook is I feel my way through the whole process. Once I got to that point, it was really liberating. And that was that stray from science or technique to free form and just being able to enjoy the medium without being stuck rigidly to ingredients. All these books right here, except maybe this one, everything's in grams. All you need is a gram scale, one of these things, and the same every single time. You know, from the customer's point of view, if it's good, it's good. That's kind of part of the fun of cooking, is as long as it's tasty in the end, the process is what it is. And there was a point where me and Nancy would just eat all over the country and go to 5-star restaurants. That was like the first 5-6 years at Hugo's. Just anywhere there was a new high-end restaurant, we would fly and go there and eat. And then we came to one restaurant, been there for 20 years, really reputable, and it hit us. It was boring. It was so perfect, lacking personality, that we started to stray from that style of eating, where it's like so precise and so perfect that it's almost sanitary. I think food too perfect robs it of what it's supposed to be, and it's organic. So what I'm doing here is cider and gelatin over an ice bath, and I'm keeping it moving. It's right here in the camera. There we go. And you can see it's starting to get viscous. If I stopped, it would coagulate on the sides, and I'd get lumps and stuff. So I'm aerating, chilling, and when I'm done with this, I've got cream that I've whipped. Fold that into it, and now I've got a liquid with gelatin that already has air in it, whipped cream that has air in it. Has to happen really fast, and then pour it into a container and put it into the cooler. and you end up with what I call a freestanding mousse. At that point, I can invert this. I can cut squares and do rectangles, and be able to serve a mousse in a style that you normally wouldn't see. You know, the Swiss were the first to incorporate air. Your Swiss meringues, they must have been huge back then when they discovered that. Italians ended up perfecting it, but I think it was the late 1800s when they first whipped egg whites for a meringue. I'm sorry, what was the question?
I said if you added Versalip to like a different type of juice other than like cider, would you still get the same like juicy texture?
You would, as long as it has no fat or proteins in it. It's like the opposite of egg whites, the opposite of cream, where you need that fat in order to hold the air in place. It works against VersaWhip. So a VersaWhip, it needs to be super clean. Hence the whipped water experiment, was to see how far you could take VersaWhip and apply it to basically bland items. Like I did water, but you took tomato water, it'd be fantastic mousse. Cucumber water.
Do you get a lot of feedback, or do you get any feedback from sort of purists who say, oh, you know, you can't be doing that with the nitrogen?
Oh yeah, especially back earlier times in cuisine, but now they get it. Now they see what we're all talking about. Like, oh, it tastes good and it's fun and it's exciting. So I don't think people get that so much anymore like they used to.
One more question, Rob.
Yes.
I just heard that question. I had the great good fortune to dine at Alinea 2 weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Today, I got my green apple balloon for my birthday.
Did you?
And it was great. I want to hear how that's made, if you can tell me. But you know what I noticed, of course, is that in that kind of thing, well, first of all, there's no menu because you're just along for the ride of all the courses.
Right.
But you know, there's not talk in, it seems, in this style of cuisine of organic, natural, because you know you're using all of these other things. I just wonder, are they sort of separate camps, or can you? You know, I'm not sure that where all these things come from. That Activa that you said, what that's made of, and how do you reconcile these
That's a
things?
great question. Let me just finish that up. So now you'll be getting this later in a dessert, and you'll see the finished product. But I just put this into the fridge, chill it, take it out in about 5 minutes, and I'll be able to cut cubes and squares out of it. That's a great question, because it's like, does it rob food of its essence? And that definitely was the case. I would say 15 plus years ago when this started happening. When the idea is to bring out more flavor, like the French, you know, a veal stock, just 2 days, bringing it down, so a tablespoon of veal stock is just super intense. So you have to sift through that as a chef, what's intensifying and what's taking away from it. And if you've heard of restaurant Noma in Copenhagen, great example of how that modernist cuisine is becoming purist, heavy on the foraging, a hands-off approach to a point, but still some of these elements apply. And then there's Favagen, and they have they're out in the middle of this, it's over in Sweden, right? Sweden, and Their restaurant seats 12 people. They're way out in the woods in this like hunting area, big hunting reserve. And they made it to like top 50 restaurants in the world last year. And they won't use any of this. All open flame cooking, so everything is on open flame and stuff. But as we were saying earlier, it's not about this stuff here. That's a tool. It's about the mindset that goes into it. And that's what I think these things did. It started with some of these, what's called hydrocolloids or whatever. And it started people thinking differently about food. And now it's kind of going away, although some of it has some value. But Favagen's a great example of them just thinking about food all over again and how to approach it. Like they age old dairy cows there. Dairy cows that people wouldn't eat before, they take a side of it and they age it for like 4 months. They lose 50% of the volume by the time they're done. When you're aging meat, you gotta cut off all the mold, then you get to the center and it's this beautiful piece of meat with minimal water. The umami aspect is in there. Favagen takes it a step further and they throw out half the cow to serve you a 4-ounce piece of like the best dry aged beef you've ever had. So a great example of where it's been, where it's going, and how it's going to, how you're going to see it level out. The whole farm to table movement in modernist cuisine is like, they're like fighting for years, and now it's each see the value. And we got 15 minutes left. So we're on the air topic. Talked about mousses, one that was more purist with gelatin, one that was more modernist with VersaWhip. This could be considered modernist, but there's only gelatin in there. So that straddles that line between old and new. But air adds so much to food. With beer, that fermentation, which was probably the original thing we all drank that had air incorporated into it. Difference between a flat beer and a cold beer that's fully carbonated. Difference between a flat soda and one that's carbonated. Night and day, you couldn't even sit through a sip of a flat soda. Throw temperature and carbonation in it and you can chug it back, no problem. So how do work air into other things besides liquids and whatnot? And that brings me to what I call puffing. Like your first thing was popcorn, which is thousands of years old. They found elements of popcorn in cultures gone by. And how popcorn works is there's a little tiny bit of moisture in there and you get that hard shell over it, that piece that gets stuck in your teeth all the time when you eat popcorn. And what that does is create a hard shell on the outside and water on the inside. However you do your popcorn, you add heat, snap steam into it, and boom, you get popcorn. So that's the oldest version of it. Then you get into cereals. And back turn of the century, 1800s and 1900s, they discovered how to puff grains. And that started the whole cereal craze that we see today. And they do it with a what's called a popping gun. And if you YouTube it, you'll see like in the streets of China, they got these little things and they'll do it like in the streets and stuff. And it's a can, and it's airtight, and you put your grains in it. Some work better than others. And then there's a flame under it, and you just turn it, and then as soon as you open up the end, it releases the pressure, and whatever grain is there pops, and it gets expanded. What that does to eating grains, eating cereal. I mean, imagine eating, before popping rice, we were eating gruel for breakfast, or porridge, And then boom, there's this snappy grain now, and it's easy to eat. So that's kind of the origins of like grain puffing, and we'll do a lot of it in the restaurant. but we don't have that machine, and you see the big industrial versions of it, it's crazy. You'd never be able to do that in a restaurant. So how we make up for it is you cook your grains over. Like you cook rice like you were gonna cook pasta, you cook quinoa, you cook barley. And what's nice is not all grains puff with the popping gun, but the method in water that I'm talking about now is like a ton of different grains you can do with it. So say it's rice, just cook it like pasta till it's pretty much overcooked. Then you dehydrate it. You dehydrate it just enough so it's dry and it still has moisture in it. Like if you let it dehydrate 10, 15 minutes longer than you should and there's no water in there, you throw it, you fry it after at high temp. You don't get that steam release. You do it properly, and you do high temp oil, like right here I got 375. You put that dehydrated grain in there with a little bit of water, boom, and whoosh, all rises to the surface, strain it off. Downside is it is fried, where the other stuff's air popped, but you could totally incorporate those things into a dish. And that art and or science and creativity meet at that point. Then there's puffing of meats, classic examples of pork rind, or cracklins, which has been around forever. And how you do those, you just take the skin, and again, you cook it overnight till it's almost falling apart, dehydrate it, same method, put it in a fryer, and you get crazy expansion. Shrimp crackers in Asian cuisine, I think a lot of us have had that. Sometimes they're very styrofoamy-like. And this is my version of that done with lobster. Bring it into Maine. And shrimp crackers, along with these, is usually a tapioca starch. You can use rice starch as well, but the tapioca, you get really great expansion from it. So this is equal parts chopped lobster, tapioca starch, lobster roe, salt, and water. And that's the trick, water. It took me, I was never given a recipe for this, so it took me like a little while before I figured it out, and couldn't put enough water into it. You get this ugly slurry out of it, and it looks god-awful when you're making it, and people are like, what is that? And then you steam it, and you cook it, freeze it, because at that point it's like bubble gum. You can barely touch it. And then slice them and dehydrate them. So these have been dehydrated just to the point where they still bend, and then I just let it air dry. And the effect from there is fun, especially kids. Kids love to see this. Well, I do too, but you get really good expansion from them. That's it. It's a little bit of work getting from lobster to here. When I finally nailed them, we had Duckfat for like a couple of years, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna make all my own chips and sell them at Duckfat. So I did pork rinds, I did our own potato chips, and I did these, and we bagged them and sealed them and put a label on them, and they sat on a shelf and no one even bought one. Because I had to charge like $7 for a bag of these to justify any of the labor that was going into it, you know, so yeah, Duckfat, many experiments happened at Duckfat. Although there is restaurants, and now Boda serves these here in town. They had them. Not as good as mine, if I can say so. Because they're a lot of work. I know how they're doing them, and it's hard to do them at a production level like that and put them on a menu and have just people rip through them and have to do it again over and over. But incorporating air into meat is what this is, just like with pork rinds or shrimp crackers or whatever. And how it collapses on your tongue, that's what makes it good, you know? Fritos have a bit of that puffing in there. Doritos too, they get a little bit in there because they know the importance of it, but you don't get it with potato chips and stuff like that. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. I'm gonna answer some questions, and then I'm gonna try to put together some food for you guys to taste, which might take me 5 minutes away from here if you wanna just
Question, anybody? You're hungry, that's the reason.
Yes.
Question in the back.
Can you grab me a save-a-day in the wooden bowl?
What's in the sous vide bath that's under pressure, and what are you doing with that?
Apples. Doing an apple dessert for you guys. So that's at 145, but I cooked them at 180. 180 takes about 4 hours, and it cooks the apple perfectly without it turning to mush or being raw, and you get that nice texture out of it. Oh, thanks. And the wooden bowl, too. Oh. Any more? Another question? Anyone?
Hey Rob, what was the secret to you being the first restaurant allowed to do fermented vegetables? Was it like a HACCP plan or?
Yes, and most HACCP plans pretty much are just record keeping. Well, one, you prove that what you're doing is safe, and secondly, you keep records. Some of it's more entailed than fermenting vegetables, which is actually pretty easy. All we had to do was send a sample to Orono, which is one of the only 5 places in the country that you can send something like that and get a test on. They come back, they make sure that your pH is where you want it, and if they say, yeah, your pH is good, you start a record book, and you just document pH every time you do a batch. So when they come in, you can show them your record keeping. Simple as that. It was so easy. But it's just funny that they're so upset. Like, oh, you're fermenting vegetables. You know, like that's going to be a major health problem. I don't know if anyone has ever gotten sick of eating poorly fermented vegetables. Again, your nose wouldn't get you past that. Your nose would say, no, I'm not going to eat that.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Question? Okay, there you go. Yes, you do.
Sorry, 2 questions. Rob, what do you think about the culinary sector in Portland and the future of it? Do you think it's here to stay, or do you think, I'm just curious.
No, that's the million-dollar question we're all asking each other. I mean, coming up with why it's such a great food town was easy. Whether it's going to be able to stay like that's another question. And me and Nancy going through 9/11 and stuff, we see how quick the bottom can fall out. So God forbid something else like that happens or whatever, gas goes up to $5 a gallon for whatever reason. People are going to be driving to Maine now after that, you know?
One of the things you mentioned was affordable space. And one of the things that we're interested in Portland is understanding what gentrification can do to creative people and their need for space. So you're talking about sort of natural disaster type things, but what about the effects of the popularity of Portland actually having a negative impact on your industry?
Yeah, definitely. Like all these condos you see going up now. A lot of these people don't even live in town. They're taking up square footage and then they go away and they come back for 2 weeks. All this big industry we see going up, Anthropology and all these other big stores. As soon as it's not making money, they pull out and then it's left like a ghost town. And where people get their money now to go out and eat, there's another factor. You know, how long is that going to be sustainable? There's a lot of questions it brings up, and I have no answers for it. But I like to think I'd be well prepared for it coming. Duckfat especially. Duckfat's very approachable still. We make everything in-house. When we first started doing dinner there, I was like, oh, no one's going to eat sandwiches for dinner, and we kind of grew into dinner. But what we get there is you can get food that was everything there except the bread for our sandwiches we make in-house. So they're getting a home-cooked meal for a good price point. And the other thing that makes us feel really stable there, and I like to say this was our master plan, but we just like grew into it. We got 5-year-olds love it and 85-year-olds love it. There's this huge, broad spectrum of people that like to eat there. Kids are my favorite because they just scream at their parents until they take them there to get the fries, you know. That's a good question, though. It's, a big thing we find with how popular it is right now is staffing. None of us can staff our restaurants anymore. It's crazy. I've created at Duckfat an entry-level culinary school there at this point. I've got 5 managers, 6 managers that we train well, and now we're set up to take in that young cook that doesn't have a lot of experience and teach them. And since we've been doing that, it feels a lot better. But last year was when I think all of us in the restaurant business saw that problem in town, that everyone's going out to eat, but at the same time, can't find people to staff it as well.
Other question?
On staff, I think part of what is so awesome about this kind of food is all that goes into it. The 25 people for 5 hours, or the 5 people that take 25 hours to do all these little tiny bits that go into the composition of a greater dish. And, unless the diner asks, how did this get made? You miss like the whole story of that. But then when the diner asks, how in the hell was this made? Your waitstaff has to know the answer to that.
Yes.
And half the time, my pet peeve forever has been that people, the chef goes to great lengths to compose a plate and never teaches the waitstaff how to put it down in front of the diner. It's all askew or going.
And the waiter comes and makes stuff up tableside.
So
totally.
it's like the learning curve must be, incredible to get everybody up to speed on that.
Well, this type of food too is a higher level of service as well. They are totally trained. A lot of them mandate that the wait staff works in the kitchen. We did that at Hugo's. All the wait staff worked in the kitchen and went through that, so they saw what was happening, and they were touching it and seeing it, and they connect with it so much better. And we also tell them, if you don't know, say that. Come in and check. Where sometimes they just they'll make up a story just so they can save themselves the trip to the kitchen to say it. But your better place is their staff is well versed on the whole thing.
You ready for me?
Yes, thank you so much.
Like where to serve it?
Yeah, we'll start bringing this stuff out. Any more questions as we wrap up today?
I was thinking more and more about the staffing models and the challenges that you noted. Is there any effort underway with chefs and owners, chef owners, talking to the educational end of society and saying, like the SMCC, you have a culinary school here, and here's where we want to go. We need more people who can be chef de cuisine or whatever, or even just people working in other areas. Is there an intersection of education with the private owner?
There totally is. We have a relationship with SMC. We've got 2 guys right now with us that are from there, but we really have a tryout that's extensive there. You come try out. If we like you, we'll invite you again to try out again. And if we like you, we bring you to the company under probation for a month. Then after a month, if you can survive that, you're in. And we get some good kids from there, but Duckfat is busy right off the bat. If that stresses you out, they're gone. We hit a record last year, a ton of hand-cut potatoes in 1 week. You know, and that's lugging 400 pounds of potatoes, you know, give or take, up and down stairs, and hand cutting them, soaking them, blanch them, containerize them. You order, we fry them again, we make our own seasoning salt, we poach all the eggs to make our own mayos. Just the fries alone is a beast. And then there's the sandwiches, we make all the fillings there. First opened up Duckfat because we just felt like we couldn't get a good sandwich in Portland. I was like, why doesn't anyone make stuff from scratch? Now I know why. It is a bear. We make all our own brisket and smoke all our own meats, and it's a lot of work. But I tell a lot of these young cooks coming in, I'm like, cooking a steak, all of us could do that. Cooking a burger. But smoke a good piece of brisket, brine and cook a turkey. That's really, I think, the craft of meat cookery is charcuterie or cold meat cooking. So there's an example.
So, can you tell us about your own creative muse? Like, what makes you think about things? Where you generate your ideas the best? What are the things that you ride a motorcycle or?
Ooh, motorcycle's my favorite. I used to do whole 18-course menus on my motorcycle. I just sit there in my head, or driving as well. A really creative time for me. And also the everyday. I go out to a diner and get, you know, poached egg on a Canadian bacon with hollandaise or whatever. And that could spark something. Bag of chips. I'm making my own Doritos at work at Duckfat because we do this snack now, and all the guys are just not into it. They're just not they're not passionate about making their own Doritos like I am. Which is, I got all the powders and stuff, the buttermilk powder and all that stuff. So the everyday, the Fritos. So look at the back of a Frito bag. It's corn oil, and salt. So I get in the kitchen, I was like, I'm gonna make my own Fritos. You know, it seems pretty easy. So inspiration could come from many different areas. Yeah. This is great. Keep asking questions. I'll get this set up. And then maybe we do row can come up. I'll have some plates. Just snacky type stuff. That way it's not a everyone at once.
So Rob, I'm going to ask you a question about a competitor. One of my favorite restaurants in Portland is Emilitza. And I don't think they get the proper respect from the food community in Portland. Do you agree with that, and why do you think that happens?
I would agree with that because I love that place. I love that they serve only Greek wines and Greek beers. I love that they stick to that. I think that's really cool what they do. I agree, they don't get the respect they do, and it's not. Yeah, it's not chef owned. That might be a big part of it. Totally different thing from hiring a chef to do what you think is right, and the chef in there brainstorming the whole process. Greek food is great, so I don't know why, outside of not being chef owned, that would be a problem, but I encourage anyone here to go there and eat. Yes?
The fermented vegetables, do they all taste like sauerkraut or like...
There's kimchi, which is really popular now. You see that everywhere. And sauerkraut's pretty bland when you compare it to kimchi, that's for sure. Kimchi is just the amount of flavors you can incorporate into it are through the roof. So no, not every fermented food tastes like sauerkraut.
We have another question over here.
I was wondering, Rob, do you miss the gourmet cooking that you were doing at Hugo's versus the more simple, not simple, but what you're doing at Duckfat?
That's a really good question. I don't really cook at Duckfat so much more. I've taken on the role of restaurateur at this point. I miss tasting menus, creating tasting menus there. I miss that energy of being with the guys in the kitchen. And, you know, but that was a 14-hour-a-day hump. I physically can't do that anymore. So selling, you know, most chefs my age, they end up becoming restaurateurs, you know. A friend of mine, a guy used to work for me, went to the laundry and came back and showed me pictures of the food. None of it is like Thomas Keller anymore. It's influence from all these other cooks, and there's something nice about that, creating a venue for guys to expand on it and whatnot. But I could see where it was going. I was going to be manager there and not in there and the hands into it. And Duckfat, that makes sense. Hugo's, it was an outlet for me, an expression. And then kind of when that was exhausted, both physically and quality of life issues as well. Just been in the kitchen for 30 years and want to spend more time on my motorcycle. You see the trend here? More time on my motorcycle.
Rob, I don't know if everybody is being as awed by what's happening here as I am, but in the midst of this very delightful conversation and demonstration, all of a sudden there's a major, big-time commercial kitchen production for a party of 70 people here. Like most good restaurants, you probably have a key person that you might want to introduce who's actually been doing half of the work here.
My wife, Nancy. It's official. And to be honest, she's my secret weapon. I wouldn't be up here. if it wasn't for her.
And Rob, I sense that the pace is going to change in a minute, and just before chaos breaks loose, and I suspect there's probably an Oxbow brew someplace in the offing. Can we just take a minute to say thank you to Rob for an absolutely amazing and enlightening and inspiring afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for your attention coming out here.
And before we shift gears, I again want to thank the Patrick Dempsey Center for Cancer, Hope, and Healing. And Mary, thank you so much for the incredible job you've done hosting this afternoon and making us all feel so welcome. Thank you.